Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today, oh boy, today we're talking about Sibelius, Symphony number 6. And it's this recording with Neeme, Järvi, and the Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra, coupled with a wonderful Pelleas and Melisande suite on bis. Definitely one of the greatest recordings ever made. First of all, there is the wonderfulness of Biss's engineering in sonics, and particularly in Gothenburg, where they made some of the most amazing sounding recordings ever. I mean, the engineering is stunning. This is an old Bis that has the warning C-back label. This is natural dynamics. It's going to blow your speakers out. Well, look, Sibelius 6 and Pelleas and Melisande suites are not the kind of works that are going to blow you through the back room. I mean, there's no bass drum. Well, there's a bass drum in Pelleas and Melisande, actually, but it's always quiet. And you know, the climaxes aren't volcanic, and the orchestras aren't like immense. So it's not going to do that, but it is a stunningly natural recording. And that's the point, naturalness. And naturalness is what this performance has. Now, you know, Sibelius' Sixth is one of the trickiest symphonies in the repertoire to pull off. First of all, it ends very softly. It ends the way it began, actually, which is kind of nice and fulfilling, but it's still very soft. Second of all, it's a very, very, well, Sibelius described it as a glass of cool spring water. I mean, it's a very almost neoclassical, elegant, finely turned, aphoristic, abrupt piece of music. It's short. It's like, I don't know, how long is it here? 27 minutes. It actually has one of Sibelius's larger orchestra. It uses a harp and a bass clarinet, which he didn't use in any of the other symphonies. The harp, of course, back in the first symphony, but the bass clarinet nowhere else. And so he was, you know, he's using a large orchestra in the most refined chamber music-like way. The slow movement is teeny, tiny, and consists of like fragments and bits and things. You know, the scherzo too, these inner movements are almost over before they begin. They're really, really tricky. And of course, the ending of the first movement is one of those problematic Sibelius endings. It comes to a big climax, then it just sort of stops quietly. It's a very enigmatic work, emotionally as well. Now, Järvi, you would think, would not be the kind of person for this incredibly refined music. It might be more suited for someone like, well, Karajan, because Karajan recorded it 3 times at least. And his second one, the Deutsche Grammophon one, is really marvelous too, with the Berlin Philharmonic. The last one's just unbelievably fast. But for some reason, Järvi was not known for his attention to detail. And you know, he was more one of those, you know, rev it up and let it happen kind of guys, which could be thrillingly exciting. It really could, because often he was. He's this wonderful conductor, and his willingness to take on unusual repertoire and just play the daylights out of it is legendary. It really is. And he did a complete Sibelius cycle with Gothenburg for Bis, which was patchy. It had its good parts and its bad parts. Symphonies 1, 2, which was incredibly quick and exciting. 3, 4 was okay. 5 wasn't so hot. 6 is this one. 7 is pretty good. But it had its ups and downs. And his remake with the same orchestra for Deutsche Grammophon wasn't really that good at all. So, you know, he did a lot of incidental music and other Sibelius things that were marvelous as part of the Bis Complete Sibelius edition. But largely, after he decamped to Deutsche Grammophon and Chandos and these other labels, Bis had needed somebody else, and so they started promoting Osmo Venska and the Lahti Symphony Orchestra in this same music. And so there was a conflict within the actual label, and the Sibelius cycle that made it into the complete edition, which I have sitting over there, is not Järvi's, it's Venska's. So the Järvi Sibelius cycle kind of drifted out of view, especially because he duplicated himself by remaking it for Deutsche Grammophon. So, you know, that was typical 1990s record insanity. You know, record industry, everybody duplicating everything and everyone doing everything, and it was all just a big mess. Now, this was recorded in 1984, 1984. Think of how long ago that was. Oh my God. That's 20, 40, 40 years ago? Was it? Could it? Gee whiz. I'm absolutely stunned. I feel like an antique. 40 years old. This recording is 40 years old. It was at the beginning of the digital era. It was. I remember when these things first started coming out, and they were thrilling because the sound was so great. And no one knew who Neeme Järvi was, and But he just takes this symphony and runs with it. I don't mean runs with it like plays it too fast. I mean runs with it like it just emerges. It emerges like a spring of cool, clear water. I mean, it's so natural. It's so effortless. The first movement, particularly, the tempo relationships in the first movement, they're so splendid. Oh my goodness, it's absolutely marvelous to hear the climax of that first movement. I can't even begin to describe it. It's like hang gliding. I mean, it's like you're carried aloft on currents of invisible force. I don't know. I'm not a poetic guy, so I can't do that very well. But it's remarkable. The whole symphony is that way. It's just perfectly placed. And there are other very good performances of the Sixth. And there are other performances that, maybe observe some of Sibelius's directions with a little bit more detail and get the minutiae in better places. I don't know. All I can tell you is that this is unquestionably one of the greatest recordings ever made of anything. It's stunning, and the Pelleas and Melisande suite is no less well put across. It's absolutely splendid and delicious, and wow, what a great record this is. And fortunately, BIS keeps things in print, even if they're not promoting them like they should sometimes. So this should be available and easier for you to hear. I've talked about it before, of course, because a lot of the greatest recordings ever happen to be some of my favorite recordings ever. So yes, they're going to get mentioned. And if we don't keep mentioning them, no one's going to pay attention. So we have to. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.